4 or 5 years ago by a colleague of mine, Wolfram Schlenker. And one big question for me was, how important could this possibly be? Agriculture is 2% of our economy. In a modern world, is this really a big deal? And at the time, I was kind of skeptical, and I have a very different view now. But I want to kind of share the way I kind of think about this and try to think about climate effects on agriculture in a very big picture sense. Okay. So 3 things I want to talk to you about today. First, some statistics about agriculture that might be a little different than statistics you've seen before. I'm really going to try to put the U.S. in world perspective. Okay. Second, I'm going to talk a little bit about some very basic economics of commodity prices in agriculture. And then third, that should say 3 now. Then I'm going to talk about some research that I've done, which is really data-intensive work relating crop yields to weather and what those basic relationships say about what might happen under projected climate changes. Okay, so number 1, a few statistics about agriculture. This is a picture of 4 key crops that really feed the world. They provide 75% of the world's caloric base. Now, that isn't the calories that people are actually eating, but a lot of the calories from corn and soybeans are fed to animals, and then we eat animal products. But these 4 crops really are where most of our food comes from worldwide. And what I've done is I've stacked the crops up in terms of the calories of the raw product. And if we're actually just counting calories, I realize that there's more to the diet than calories. But if we were just counting calories and we needed 2,000 calories a day for each person, then the sum of these 4 crops could now feed about over 7 billion people, which is much larger than the world population. Of course, we have other types of things, and a lot of this is going into animals. And the conversion rate of calories of grains to calories derived from animals is about 5 to 10 to 1. So it takes 5 to 10 grain calories to get, say, 1 calorie of meat. But those are the 4 key crops: corn, wheat, rice, and soybeans. And you can see that the productivity has grown really rapidly. Another thing I want you to notice is that production is very smooth. If you sum this up worldwide, it's remarkable how it's just a steady trend up. And there isn't a whole lot of variation. And save that thought. United States production. We produce 39% of the world's corn. We're 5% of the world's population. We produce 39% of the world's corn. We produce 38% of the world's soybeans. That's a rapidly declining share, actually. We used to produce a lot more. Now Argentina and Brazil are producing a lot more. We produce about 9% of the world's wheat, still nearly twice our population share. And about 2% of the world's rice. We export most of that. For all these shares, we're a much larger share of the world market in terms of exports. We dominate the world market in trade of agriculture. What happens in the United States, our production really drives world prices. So, my backdrop here, and I'll come back to this is why the U.S. is so important. A lot of people, when they think about climate change effects on agriculture, they think, well, we need to look at developing countries, right? Because they're mostly in warmer climates and they're probably going to get hit pretty badly, and that's probably true. But we also need to look at the United States. Why? Because we're the biggest producer. We're what really matter for commodity prices. If we just sum this up and look at calories, we have the United States down here, and this line right here is the top of that same graph that I showed you a moment ago. And one interesting, I think you should notice, this is our share. It's been pretty steady. It's not a declining share. At 23% of the world caloric base is pretty constant. But the fluctuations that we see in the world kind of mimic what we see in the United States. Those small fluctuations are driven mostly by the United States. Mainly because my hypothesis is that we have so much production concentrated in a very localized area. And so the weather shocks there don't average out quite as much. Okay, so all that growth, where is it coming from? We're producing more and more food all the time, and this has really been a good thing. It's fed the world, right? Well, it's really come from incredible productivity growth. And that's what this picture shows. It shows yield per acre of corn, which is kind of the most amazing crop in terms of yield growth. It was pretty flat, about, in this well, this is just an index, where it's set to 100 around 1945, I believe. But we've grown from this index value of around 90 to about 475. So over a 5-fold increase since the 1930s. So really remarkable yield growth. And it's a fairly linear trend since the late 1930s. And this trend took off with the adoption of hybrid corn, which actually started right after the Dust Bowl. In 1937 was when farmers started picking it up in a pretty big way, which I think is kind of an interesting fact. But as a result of this remarkable yield growth, land area that we've had to use in agriculture production has really actually declined, at least for corn. And if you look across all the major staples, it's pretty much a flat line for the last 100 years. Using the same amount of land, we've been able to produce a whole lot more. And that's kind of mimicked throughout the world, because these new technologies, Norman Borlaug, who died just a couple of years ago, went on a mission to spread these technologies throughout the world, and we've had yield growth throughout the whole world. You know, I don't know the specific numbers, but people say that he's probably saved billions of people, and that's probably true. I think that's reasonable. Yield growth throughout the entire world has grown about 100% over the last 50 years or so. But this picture, which shows the cumulative yield growth since 1961, between 1960 and about 1985, if we look worldwide, the yield growth was actually faster than population growth. But it looks like yield growth may be slowing down a little bit. The exception appears to be corn, which is the black one. But yield growth, particularly as a percentage of the crop, does appear to be slowing down. Now, that's not absolutely certain, and maybe things will change going forward, but recently, yields have not been growing as quickly as population, and there's also new sources of demand, which I'll talk about in a moment. Okay, so that's one. Those are some big picture statistics on world agriculture. 2, basic economics of food commodity prices.